So how do we get to the space of somebody's coming to me, they're at the worst stage or dark stage of their life. And I'm going to skip a major story that I was planning on sharing just for time reasons. But I think my past experience leads me to a place where even though I might not be able to address some of these feelings of like angst and fear and stress that might be interfering with cognitive functioning, I've been in situations where I've had to be a caregiver. I had to care for my brother who was 35 and he had been diagnosed with ALS. I became his caregiver because my parents had passed away. And it was like my world was turned upside down. My brother was absolutely remarkable. And I'm going to just kind of give a quote for what we did during that time together to kind of get through it, or his motto. And obviously his was to get through the stage of like life and what he was going through with his illness. But he said, I want to ride this thing until the wheels come off. And it just like resonated with me. I'm like, this is what we need to do. And the reason why I wanted to bring it up was, one, because I've been in a situation where it's dark and scary, and I've also seen somebody persevere in their darkest times. And I think to have that positive motto or something to get you through and push you through can really change your frame of mind. Like, okay, I'm going to push through. And sometimes for people, when I work with them for autoimmune encephalitis, we're just using those training wheels and we're going to ride it till the wheels come off until those wheels can come off. And for others, it might be, we're going to ride those wheels and we're going to keep those training wheels on until we don't feel like we have them anymore. We still may need them, but we're going to ride them. So I have many different things here. I'm going to skip this situation. So my job is tricky in that, as Dr. Pizzoli mentioned, there's all these different factors. There's physical factors with sleep, fatigue, not feeling well. There's emotional factors. There's psychiatric factors. There's cognitive factors. My job is to work on the cognitive when all these other things influence them and impact me. But I'm not trained to treat anxiety. I am not trained to treat depression. So it puts me in a tricky situation. Well, do I just ignore those things? It's influencing me negatively. So no, I can't, and I just can't sit by. So what do? I really do address them head on, and I don't know that everybody in my practice does that. I think maybe just my life experiences and time being with people going through brain recovery makes me feel comfortable. And I'm okay if they don't necessarily like what I'm saying. We still work through it. And sometimes it's like, you know what, you're coming in, your head is full of all these things. You have angst, you have worry. But I don't know if you realize it. Every time we try to do a memory activity, you start talking about the emotional impact that you're having. And it's important, and I want to hear that, but I can't spend all of our time listening to it. We have to find a space where you can work on it here or process it here so we can work on the cognitive tasks. Sometimes that simple conversation, like it never comes back in my session again. Sometimes I have to revisit it and say, I think you need to talk to your doctor, or maybe you can consider counseling or going to a support group. And sometimes those recommendations are never followed. But the fact that I brought it up and we have that now connection, like, oh, my emotions and how I'm feeling is impacting my cognitive performance, whether it's impeding the actual skill or whether it's just interfering me to use the strategies and techniques. And it really helps somebody like move forward or step forward. And I think that's a really important factor when trying to get into that mindful state for rehabilitation. So it's just not a simple thing. We have to process it and make sure the person has supports. So how do we get to that present mindful state in the middle of all these distractors, internal and external? It's with structure, with stimulation, and gradual reintegration. If we're in the now, we can maximize our current skills, use strategies and exercises. If we're in the past or thinking about the future, we miss out on the opportunities to grow and improve with our current abilities, with where we're at now. So return may be gradual and it may take time to build up that endurance. For others, it may be returning to the same role, it may be returning to a different role, but being able to do something one day that you weren't able to do the day before is very empowering. So I will make this short. I like to correlate cognitive rehab to training for a marathon. My husband is somebody that is very athletic. I do not have that skill, nor do I have that desire, but it's very impressive to me. He gets up at 4 in the morning, he selects a race, he identifies it, he looks at the course, he knows if his training needs to be 12 weeks, if it needs to be 16 weeks, he knows what he needs to do for fuel, he knows where he had breakdowns in previous races, and he plans this all out. So we have this training, and we're ready to start, and we have, I'm gonna beat my goal for next time. And then an injury happens, right? His ankle gives out, his knee gives out, and things change. And not only do we have that physical change, right? Because now he actually can't go out and practice and run, and he's not maybe going to be able to do the goal that he initially set out for that particular race. And it's like, it's very difficult in the house when that happens. He's very upset. It's hard as like a spouse. Well, okay, you're running all these miles, you have to expect to get hurt. But I can't say that because that's not kind and supportive. But over the years, I've realized like there's a process that he's going through. He has to rehab emotionally and physically in order to get back on track and start training again. So again, an orthopedic running injury may be something shorter, like 2 weeks to 6 weeks, compared to somebody with a cognitive rehabilitation path. But again, it reminds me, like, okay, people are taken off guard and they're not moving forward with the path that they were envisioning, right? That's a lot. That's a big process. So a race versus a career versus where they are in school, like there's a setback. And how do we get into that space in order to maximize the recovery? Everybody can hear me, right? Okay, great. All right, so we have on the left side of the screen all these cognitive tasks. We have to plan for doctor's appointments and to do. We have to return the library book. We have to go to a doctor's visit. We have to go to therapy. We have all these things, right? And then this is like pretty messy. There's a lot of stuff there. Somebody comes in and then just messes up all the stuff. And now that throws up your order. Like, oh, I knew I had a doctor's appointment, but where did I put that card? And where's that list? I know somebody's birthday is this month. And how do all of these feelings about our cognitive communication skills, how do they impact us? Right? We have, we get worried. We don't know if we're going to be able to do what we did before. We don't know if our loved ones are going to be able to do what they did before. And we have to process these emotions. Let me see. Sorry, I just want to make sure. A good example of this was this week I was working with somebody. She had encephalitis and she was doing really well in the session. I gave her the positive feedback and she said, but that's not, I don't feel like that was good. It's different than the way I would have done it before. Did you see that I did X, Y, and Z? I said, I did see that you did that, but it wasn't interfering and you completed the task accurately. There was no issue. And she heard what I said and she understood and she agreed. She's like, but it doesn't change like when I'm out with my friends, I block and I can't have that conversation. She gave me a specific example how she was talking with a friend and the friend referred to her ex-husband and the person didn't remember this ex-husband. She just totally blocked out her friend's ex-husband. Wasn't something on the radar. And, you know, once her friend started talking about it, like, oh, you see, you're here with your kids at the wedding. You were here. She remembered it. And going forward, she didn't forget it. But that initial feeling of, oh my gosh, I can't remember this. This is the result of this encephalitis. This is, maybe I'm getting worse. And you have these emotions that kind of sweep you over. And it led to a really positive discussion. It was like, how do we take these moments and utilize it? Because from my perspective, I'm like, this is beautiful. I could never mock the situation in my therapy room of you forgetting your friend's ex-husband. I'm like, maybe you blocked him out for different reasons and we laughed about it. But the fact that this situation came up and it triggered a memory that you had to relive and re-encode and take the time to process it is therapy. You're in this road and you stepped forward and you were able to apply the strategies and process. So instead of being worried or concerned, because you know you have this condition and you know that sometimes you're going to remember, sometimes you're not, and we can't predict it. But when the moments happen, maybe we can use it for good. Maybe you could see like, oh, I'm doing my therapy, right? So the initial is jarring, but I'm doing my therapy. I'm filling in some of the blanks. And we talked about also external strategies and jotting it down. But it was a really like great conversation. And for many reasons, it's like, okay, in the session, she was doing well, and she didn't feel that I understood what was happening outside of the therapy room. She gives me a really great example of how jarring it really is. I'm like, oh, I see what you're saying, and I know you have the strategies, and I know you could do it, and we can't control that. We can't control when you're going to remember, when you're not going to remember, but what can we control? What we do when the situation arises. So I think that speaks to how do we tap into resiliency? We know our strengths and weaknesses. We have to be aware of those influencing factors in our lives. We have to be in the now, and we have to work with what we have. And in doing so, we're going to ride this thing until the wheels come off. We have to push forward, right? So I'd like to move on to talking about some of the... Okay, so I'd like to talk about some of the strategies and techniques. I think it's super important that everybody understands a lot of the information that I share in my sessions, nothing new. People have been using these either techniques or approaches their entire lives, from when they were younger to when they're older, and they vary them depending upon their needs. But when we're doing a cognitive rehabilitation, when we're improving skills, sometimes we need to access strategies or use things more than we previously did. So there are external approaches that we can use for orientation and memory. So a lot of times we rely, and it's easier because the people that are around us are the easiest way to like refresh our memory. So that is good to a certain extent. So I don't want to remove caregivers or coworkers or the people that are in your class, and you still want to use them as a resource. But while you're trying to improve your skills, you want to try to rely on more things that you have control over. So you can, instead of asking a friend or a coworker, you can reference a calendar. You can reference your phone. You can reference your to-do list, your planner, your memory. Maybe you need some applications on your phone to set a reminder in terms of, I need to make sure I take my medicine here. I always seem to forget. I get lost in conversation midday. I have no problem in the morning. I have no problem at night, but I really need an app so that so-and-so doesn't have to call me to check on me to make sure that I'm taking my medicine. So external techniques are really everything outside of your body that's going to help you remember certain things so that you can get that flow of more. It might be modified independence, but it's still more independence than totally relying on somebody else to tell you what to do. So I don't know, I'm a little worried because this might be a technology. There were 3 words that flashed on the screen earlier in my presentation. And I'm curious if anyone can recall what they were or how many words. I don't know if people like raise their hands or I might need you.
There is a feature that you can raise your hand. So if the question about did you see the words? Would that be the first question?
So the first word would be how many words were there? And I guess the second one was, can you recall what they were?
Okay. How many words were there? If you just type that into the chat, do you know how many words sneaky popped up on the screen? And you can just type in a number. I think everybody's hesitant to type in a number.
I hope it's because this is going to prove my point. that when we're not paying attention or there's other information that we're processing, we can't get everything that's kind of coming across, either visually or hearing it.
Yeah.
I don't see the chat. Are people
Okay,
responding?
I can tell you that you did say 3 words. So one person said 3 because you just said it. So they were listening. Nice job.
Oh!
So there were 3 words. I guess the easiest thing is if you remember any of the words, can you type them into the chat? Just type in any of the words that you saw come up. Anybody have
Thanks,
some words
Meg,
they
for your
saw?
support.
Got ability, windy, truck. Anybody else?
Okay, so windy and truck were one. Ability was one of those intruders that we try to fill in the blanks, but that was not one of the words that flashed across the screen.
Rose.
Windy, truck, and rose. Those are the 3 words.
Nice. Windy,
Okay.
truck, and rose.
So obviously we need to be processing information and paying attention in order to see what they were. And I think it was beautiful because collectively we were able to connect all the dots, and we worked together as a team and are able to complete the task. So that was also good. But what is important is if we have these words and we actually got them and we need to recall them for a later date, what are some of the ways in our minds we can help encode them or store them in our minds to retrieve them later on? And at Transitions, we use an acronym called CRAVE, and it's basically tools and strategies that we use to learn information and recall information. So we sometimes categorize or chunk or group information because our mind can work better if we have smaller units. In this case, 3 words isn't a lot. It's not a large amount, but if we had like 9 things that we had to get at the grocery store, it might help to like break it down in terms of like, oh, I need to get dairy, I need to get 3 breads versus having to remember all 9 things. You can remember categories much easier. Repetition is super important, and the thing that I stress when working with individuals with any type of brain injury is that repetitions are only good if you're processing the repetition. So if your person is saying, if you are reading it but you're not processing it, or you've asked your significant other or your parent 5 times when we're going to a particular event, but you're not really like processing it and holding it or looking at the calendar and really making an effort, it's like one in one ear and out the other. It has to be an active process. And sometimes that's a matter of, okay, maybe I just need to jot that down, give myself a moment to focus on this information. So it could be repeating things that you hear, saying something out loud, rereading something, or rewriting something. So there's many avenues to exercise that strategy. Association is coming up with links and connections that are meaningful to you. So I can give you tons of associations, but if you didn't come up with it, it's just extra information that's weighing on you that you have to remember. You need to come up with these internal connections. So maybe you have a cousin named Melissa, and it's going to be easy for you to remember my name is Melissa. But if you don't, maybe you are Greek and you know Melissa means honeybee and you saw that I had a bee picture behind me. That connection might be meaningful to you. So it really is, again, an internal process. Visualization is creating a mental picture, or sometimes it's taking a moment to see the actual field or environment that you're in to really visualize it, to encode where certain things are. And elaboration is expanding. So for Windy, Truck, and Rose, I might come up with a strategy to elaborate and come up with a story that is, my cousin put a rose on his wife's truck, but it was windy and it blew away. So that might be my thing. Somebody might put picture maybe they're a parent and they picture in their handbag. Okay, it was really windy, so I put my daughter's rose and my son's truck in my bag so it didn't get blown away. Okay, so it's going to vary. Also helpful to pair things with a motor skill. So for me, sometimes the auditory information isn't as easy for me to grasp. So even when I'm doing memory exercises, I find myself encoding with my fingers to give myself some physical anchor to like, okay, these are the words that we're doing. And sometimes that helps people, sometimes tapping, and obviously depending upon what information certain strengths or certain techniques would be better with certain information. And mnemonics is like I use CRAVE. It's an acronym that you might use, or when we learned the colors of the alphabet, Roy G. Biv. It's kind of coming up with a way that makes it easier to recall the information. Okay, Meg, how am I on time? I don't hear you. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. About 10 more minutes, maybe, if that works.
10 more? Sure. Good. Okay. All right. So those are strategies. We did external and internal strategies for memory. How do we focus and what strategies or techniques? And I think Dr. Pizzoli actually touched upon that in her overall flow that she was giving in terms of setting up structure for the day. How do you build attention? How do you build endurance? When I have a big presentation, right? Sometimes I have all these other things that I need to take care of, and I keep on like losing sight. Okay, my deadline is approaching, so I need to really like anchor myself down. I need to think of my goal. I need to set a timer. I need to do it for X amount of minutes. I need to take a break. I need to go back. I need to set a timer. So the Pomodoro technique is great because, again, it was set up to do, you set up a goal, you pick a task that's the most important, you set a timer for 25 minutes, you focus, you work, you take a 5-minute break, and then you go back and you kind of circle and what do you need to get done. And after you do a few of those rotations, you take a longer break. But you don't need to follow this precisely when you might not need to have 25 minutes to do a task, or you might not be ready to sustain your attention for 25 minutes. So you start slowly. You pick 10 minutes, you take a break. And the way, if you structure your time and have a path, it's really easier to follow through. It's really structure and stimulation really helps with skills, it helps with focus, it helps with follow through. And when we lose sight or see that we're not as efficient, we could go back to this circle and see, oh, where was the breakdown? And that brings me to executive functioning. So it's like, how do you pick out the most important thing? How do you set up a timeline? How do you know that you're performing well? How do you know how to revise it? How do you know to do that better next time? Right. So it's actually a business strategy that I think it stemmed from like a business practice. You plan something, you do something, you check it, you act, and then you kind of do the process again until you have a really good, solid process that's working efficiently and effectively. So for me, it's plan. I need to prep for this presentation, let's say. If you asked me to do it when I first started planning, it would absolutely be a mess. Aside from the technology piece, I have my thoughts, I know what I want to share, but I didn't lay it all out, I didn't practice it, I didn't rehearse it, I didn't see what worked, I didn't see what didn't work, and I've had the opportunity to go through it a few times in order to revise and improve. If you think about when you go somewhere for the first time and you've never been there, how do you, sometimes you take the wrong turn. Sometimes you didn't go through that path, so you didn't know that this was going to distract you. Or when they said the second right, it wasn't the second right after this, it was starting at this point, right? So now you go to this place and you've done that a few times. The next time you don't make that wrong turn. And then the next time you don't have to think as much. And eventually you take that road, that trip, and you don't have to think as much. It becomes more effortless. I'm not going to say totally effortless because we still have to pay attention, especially if we're the ones that are driving. But the fact that you go somewhere for the first time, you make errors, you need to revise. And when you do it more and more, it kind of speaks to, I guess, that neuroplasticity concept that Dr. Pelosi was talking about earlier. Do it, and then it reinforces the skills that you're trying to execute. Okay. And then I just want to address some word finding strategies. Plenty of times, people come to me and say, I don't know, it's frustrating, I know what I want to say, I can't say it. So there's different strategies that we have. And as we go through, some of them are helpful for the individual themselves, and some of them are helpful for the people that they're communicating with to be aware of. So encourage use of description. So if the person themselves you can't think of the word, then describe it. Oftentimes people don't even realize they're describing it. I understand perfectly. I didn't even know there was a hiccup. I didn't know you needed a specific word. You described it to me. So you were effective in communicating your thoughts. And on the end, it didn't matter to me if you used one word or you used a description. I knew what you meant, and that was a successful exchange. If you are listening to the person, encourage that. If somebody's blanked and paused and like befuddled because they can't think of the word, just say, oh, describe it. You can use question prompts. I didn't understand that. What was that in reference to? If you need somebody to be more specific. The person can use a synonymous word or an opposite word. Sometimes if we can't think of the precise word, the opposite word comes out. Sometimes we're like, oh, I could think of a word that's close. It's not the exact word that I want. Just let it go. Use the one that's close and move on, because again, you'll be effectively communicating. Sometimes it might be a category. If I could use the name of the category, somebody will get the gist of what I'm saying. I give enough referential information for it to be successful. For somebody that really has a lot of breakdowns in terms of formulating sentences and organizing their thoughts, sometimes just using the environment and using gestures is very helpful. And encourage communication engagement. I think stimulation and structure is like the biggest factor in terms of being a successful communicator, recovering your cognitive skills, recovering your communication skills. You need the stimulation or else things stay stagnant. So they have to be active, you have to exercise. So for the person, you might need to encourage yourself, and then for the communication partners, you may need to encourage that engagement. And don't be afraid to discuss the communication breakdowns. So if you're worried or concerned as the individual, it might be helpful to hear that, oh, I didn't even notice. Then you're like, oh, it felt so much more drastic of an interference or a latency and a barrier in our communication. So it might be nice to hear that. And as the listener, it might be important to let the person know, I didn't really understand what you were saying. And to have these open dialogues, it helps repair the communication breakdown. And that's really the end goal. We want to be successful communicators. How we get there is quite a process and sometimes frustrating. But if we're getting to the end goal, I think that's very important. Okay, and then let's see. Okay, I think I'm doing good. So the biggest takeaways, structure and stimulation. It's really important, and it's important that it's paced where the person is. So as caregivers, again, we might not know, and we might push too much or we might push too little, and we're not aware that the person can do more. So again, it's this awkward dance of when we're ready to step forward, but the only way that we know where we're at is by actually doing it, trying it. And if it didn't work, okay, what do we need to do? Let's revisit. Maybe we just need a shorter duration. We still need to attempt and revise and approach it so that we can be successful. I think being in the now, it's, again, easier said than done, and I understand that. Being in the now is hard. Being in the now is like, okay, I'm not going to think about the past. I'm not going to think about the future. I have to work with what I have right now. And that's when people are very successful in working on the rehab process. I see what I have now. I need to do X, Y, and Z, and then I execute it. Is it the way I wanted it from before? Is it the way I'm going to do in the future? Nobody really knows for sure. But if you could be in the now, you could be successful. If you could do something today that you couldn't do yesterday, then we know that we're moving in the right direction. And we have to work with what we have. And we shall ride this thing till the wheels come off. Okay. I hope I did well. I apologize for the technology.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. Great information. And you definitely passed the technology challenge test. And having you on the phone, it felt so much more personal. Like it felt like you were talking directly to us. Sure. So yeah, if you have questions for Melissa, she is going to be hanging out till the end, and hopefully we're going to end up having time for questions. And you can just type those in the chat when we get there. So thank you, Melissa. We're going to keep moving on.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.